Thank you very much, everyone. Professor Ahmed Ghoneim and Professor Saber, good morning to you and welcome to today's webinar on the focus on Egypt key area of development. We shall discuss, among others, on governance, the rule of law, the economy, and social inclusion. Before we start, there's a question that I really want to ask on renewable energy. I wanted to start on the rule of law, but I'll jump in onto that later on. My question is, national strategy on green energy goal in Egypt is to increase the share of renewable energy by 42% by 2030. Right now, the share of renewable energy is about 31%. My question to you, I will start with you, Professor Ahmed. Is this realistic and achievable?
Okay, let me start by saying it's a pleasure to be among you here, all of you, and thanks for the invitation to talk about the development in Egypt on different aspects. And when it comes to renewable energy, Egypt is not a latecomer. Egypt has been doing a lot of different projects, and a lot of efforts have been undertaken in terms of renewable energy. And this has started a long while ago, and several projects are already happening in Egypt, whether we're talking about solar energy or wind energy or other types of renewable energy. And there is a very big project, probably the largest in Africa and the Middle East. It's called Binban, for producing electricity out of renewable energy. And I think the pace that Egypt is working with regarding renewable energy can allow her definitely to reach this percent and maybe exceed it by 2030, according to the strategy that you identified. So I'm not worried at all in terms of renewable energy in the case of Egypt. It is one of the files that I believe when it comes to development, we have been doing a great job. And in fact, again, we are advanced compared to other neighbors in terms of producing different sources of renewable energy. So that's my first answer to your question.
Thank you so much, Professor. Professor Saber, I just want you to now come back to the rule of law in Egypt. I was looking at ease of doing business in Egypt. One of the weakest link is the contract enforcement in Egypt. That's weak. My question is, what can be done to improve contract enforcement, especially to improve business climate in Egypt, according to you?
Okay, the point of rule of law, we talk about some issues related to the investor. So when we talk about the time to start your business, this is very critical for investor. This time required more steps in Egyptian government to start your business. And this is main challenge to the Egyptian government. So in this case, when we talk about doing business reports, all recommendations focus on how to decrease or eliminate the time to start business. This is step number one. So in this case, the Egyptian leadership try to focus on this point. So we can use digitalization to make the online steps to decrease these requirements, to limit the steps to start your business. What about phase two? When we talk about the requirements, so maybe signature from the Ministry of Finance, another signature from Ministry of all ministries required signature and signature. So in this case, talk about more complicated issues in this. All the framework for these steps or the start your business and what about the start your production required, we talk about open-minded desk. In this case, talk about how you can decrease the time with the professionals. We want professionals in the investor relationship. Investor relationship, this is very critical. So the rule of law is very important for Egyptian. But At the high level, when we talk about the president, the government, yes, all available. But the main problem at the lower levels, which deal directly with the investor. This is the main issue. So, in my opinion, the key to solve this problem when we talk about the micro steps, not macro. Macro is very good. Okay, we talk about the high level, but at micro level, this is the main challenge for the Egyptian government.
Thank you very much. Let's stick to business creation. I want to talk about the agricultural sector. The reason is because it provides livelihood to 55% of the population in Egypt at the moment, employed 23% of the working population. There's a research that shows that a 1% increase in agricultural output equals to 0.15% increase in GDP. And my question is, what makes the Egyptian agriculture sector resilient, in your own opinion? I'm still with you, Professor Saber.
The agriculture sector, we talk about agriculture sector. In this case, we talk about a lot of factors that affect the agriculture sector in Egypt and the contribution to GDP. Number one, we talk about the burdens on the farmers in Egypt. So when we talk about real example, that suppose the price for any product, okay, or any crop like $1, the price of the same crop at the market for final consumer may be $10. So the gap, $9, not for the direct farmer, but we talk about more retails, profit for retails, not the direct farmer. So this is the main critical point in this sector. Another critical point when we talk about the technology used. Technology used in agriculture sector, we can talk about the simple and not advanced like Europe countries or developed countries. In Egypt, we talk about the future. What about the future for agriculture? Only one crop that had the future in Egypt, this is orange. Orange, Egypt #1 in the orange exports to the world. So in this case, we talk about, yes, Egypt, some problems, some challenges related to technology, related to retails, related to the circumstance for the farmers or direct farmers and burdens. So in this case, we can talk about how we can improve the conditions for the direct farmers, how we can subsidize or provide subsidies for the farmers, maybe subsidies for inputs used in the agriculture products, maybe subsidies related to some loans with a lower tax rate than any market price or any market tax rate. In this case, talk about direct and the same problems that farmers subject to barriers. And what about the crisis in the crops? Some farmers suffering from any crisis and unexpected events for the crops, maybe for not available requirements, not available inputs, and all included and direct effect in the farmers. And so we need to focus on farmers first.
Thank you very much. You don't have fertilizer issues in Egypt, right? Fertilizer accessible.
Yes,
affordable.
yes. This is the second emerging sector in Egypt. Fertilizing and fertilizers. Egypt has a comparative advantage in these products. Fertilize and what about the future? When we talk about the potential trade to the world, Egypt only 2 products, orange and fertilizers. These are two main products in the potential trade to the world.
Thank you very much, Professor. Professor Ahmed, I'm coming back to you. We cannot have a webinar on key area of development in Egypt without talking about the construction sector. As you all know, is the key driver of growth, in the Egypt economy. Professor Ahmed, I want to ask you a question. You know, there's a lot of construction projects in Egypt. You know, you have the North City, $32 billion, according to ABiQ estimate. You have also the construction of the new administrative capital. You have the construction of the nuclear power plant, worth 29 billion, I think is Dabar. You have all these construction projects, but at the same time, Professor Ahmed, you have a youth unemployment of 24% in 2021, according to the World Bank. Why is it this? I don't know what is the contradiction. I mean, construction sector investments such as those are, you know, made to create jobs in the short term, especially for the youth. Professor, any thought on that?
Well, actually, I'm a little bit surprised because according to my knowledge, the construction sectors are among the main drivers, as you rightly mentioned, for growth, and they help to absorb a lot of the unemployment in Egypt. And in fact, the question was not the increasing number of the rate of unemployment, but rather that we had a decline in unemployment rates. But the question was whether this was sustainable or not. And here comes the main two issues, the sustainability and decent jobs issue. So definitely construction sector was the main driver of growth in Egypt in the last period. And it helped to absorb a lot of unemployed, especially when we're talking about the low-skilled type of labor and the informal sector. It absorbed a lot, and that it was reflected in both data, and you can see it. I mean, in terms of the eyes, that this helped a lot. So my fear is not the increase of unemployment, but rather, again, as I mentioned, the sustainability and the decent job issue that we care about. And here comes the type of construction. The most important issue is the construction should be used for further investment and not for consumption. So, and this is already taken care of by the types of construction projects you mentioned. They are not necessarily for consumption aspects, but rather for investment in terms of creating value added in the future by creating the new cities and creating new venues for employment in other sectors. As we all know, the construction sector, when it grows, it leads to at least 60 other sectors working with it, whether we're talking about transport, bricks, cement, steel, and so on and so forth. So I think this is taken care of. What is needed is some kind of a shift to what is after such construction sectors. We use it as in terms of public investment to crowd in private investment and not crowding out private investment. And this has been taken care of not only in the projects you mentioned, but as well in other projects that are almost happening in all the governorates of Egypt by creating new cities. So it is a period where you have a lot of construction, and the positive aspect and the value added should arise afterwards when the private investment make use of this public investment and good connectivity of whole Egypt.
Thank you very much, Professor. There's my next area of discussion. I'm still with you, Professor Ahmed, if you allow me, is the tourist sector. We know Egypt depends a lot of tourists. A lot of tourists is the way to create jobs, you know, make money flow into the country. But it was very much affected by the COVID-19. What measure did Egypt took, you know, to kind of, you know, make recovery of this sector?
Again, adding to what you said, COVID-19 affected the tourism sector heavily, especially that's one of the main sources of foreign exchange, but it is a comparable issue. So Egypt, compared to other countries, did not have a full lockdown, and it adopted, let's say, an open strategy for tourists, which helped, again, compared to other countries, but not compared to the norm of Egypt, to keep the tourism sector at least surviving despite the negative effects. What actually affected us in a harsh mean was the Ukraine-Russian war, because simply 40% of the tourists in Egypt come from both those two countries. So you can imagine the huge loss that the tourism sector has been suffering from. So what we did in terms of trying to mitigate the negative effect is that among the things we're doing is that we facilitated the visa for a number of other countries that usually had a problem in obtaining a visa for Egypt. We started shifting markets not only by focusing on the European market, but rather by diversifying and looking at the Asian and African market. We started as well trying to have new products, like due to the increase of energy prices in Europe, we're trying to have some touristic projects for the people who are elderly people, senior people who retired in Europe, and they can spend the winter in Egypt and enjoying the low prices of energy compared to their countries, or working from home style. So we're trying to innovate a number of projects and ideas that help to attract tourists from other regions, as well as new style of tourism that was not normally available in Egypt.
Thank you very much for this question, for this answer, Professor, and insight. Professor Saber, I just want to come back to you in another area of development, which is manufacturing. As you have noticed, I'm trying to, make sure we touch as much area as possible to kind of have insight from you guys, because we just have 40 minutes. Professor Saber, I'll go back to another area of development, which is manufacturing. There's evidence that shows that 1% increase in manufacturing output in Egypt equals to 0.17% increase in GDP. This sector is so important. When I talk of manufacturing, I talk of building materials, fertilizer, automobile. My question to you is, what makes the Egyptian manufacturing sector resilient, especially throughout the COVID-19? I've heard that the tourist sector was affected, but I didn't hear much about the manufacturing sector. My question, that's why I'm asking the question, what makes that sector in Egypt so resilient?
Yes, first, the contribution of sectors to GDP or Egyptian GDP, more than 50% service. So we can claim that the Egyptian economy depends on service sector. Number two, manufacturing sector greater than 30%. So the main problems for manufacturers in manufacturing sector in Egypt, we talk about the imports of inputs. So the final product in Egypt, due to the value add, we talk about almost 40% maybe local Egyptian, but more than 60% depends on the other countries or depends on the import. So the last two events for the first time in the world, we talk about COVID-19 and the Russian war. We talk about short-term or short years, 2 years between the two events. The two events, negative and significant impact on the manufacturing sector. So what about the main problem? How we can import the inputs? To import the inputs, talk about the central bank in Egypt. Central bank in Egypt control this problem. So this is trade issue, not a monetary issue. So this is the main challenge for the law in Egypt. When we talk about trade issue or monetary issue, the central bank hold this issue as a monetary issue, and this is the main problem. The central bank, the main task for central bank, when we talk about the dollars, give me dollars to can prepare our imports or import the required products. But in this case, we talk about the direct link between the monetary issue and trade issue. So the what about the final product? Final product is waiting for the imports. Waiting for the imports for two reasons. Number one, the shortage in dollars in Egypt. Number two, the problems in supply chain in the world due to the war, due to the crisis of COVID-19, the increasing in shipping prices in the world, and all affected directly in manufacturing sector. So, in my opinion, to solve this problem, we need to focus on how Egypt can make the complementary products. So, for example, when we talk about the vehicle product or cars, I want to produce the motor in Egypt. I want to produce the tires in Egypt. So in this case, talk about connection between stages, not the last stage, not the last stage only, because my last stage waiting to the other stages before. And this is the main problem in our manufacturing sector. Today, we talk about the businessmen try to solve this problem, and with some decisions from the central bank, we talk about LC or back to another methods for trade finance. So all this problem increases the uncertainty for the investor. The uncertainty for investor, this is the main challenge. But when we talk about clear steps, clear strategy for the central bank and cooperation with the Ministry of Trade, and in this case, talk about the clear vision to decrease the uncertainty degree for the investor.
That makes sense to me. That makes absolute sense. Thank you very much, Professor. I just want to ask another question on certain area, on an area that is very keen to me, which is the social inclusion. You know, with the contribution of technology. You know, how can we make financial inclusion more of a reality in Egypt, according to you? I'll also ask that question after you answer it to also Professor Ahmed. How can we make social inclusion a more reality, or financial inclusion, if you want to, more of a reality in Egypt?
Financial inclusion?
Yes, or social inclusion, but I want the specific to be specific when I speak about financial inclusion. In your own opinion,
this question for Dr. Ahmed?
It's for both of you. I will start with Professor Saber, and then I'll also ask the same question here.
Okay, for financial inclusion, first, we focus on the simple concept of this financial inclusion. So we see the financial inclusion as only you have a bank account, and this is the main problem. We need, what about the other steps? What about what's next? So we focus only, yes, you want a bank account and all done, we finish the financial inclusion, and this is wrong. Financial inclusion required that we can connect all issues with this bank account. We need to make your tax paid by this bank account. We need your purchases, all your purchases, all your money transferred, cash in, cash out, included in this account. So in Egypt, yes, we started the first step or the first milestone that we create bank account for employees, for all employees in the Egyptian economy and for other people. But in my opinion, we need the next step to make the other steps to connect this bank account with the digital transformation, with the tax reform. So in this case, some retailers or some places try to play in the bill to avoid the tax. So when we talk about the financial inclusion, this is the key to solve this problem. All cleared, all available on the screen, all available on the screen. So this, we need another steps. We need professional minds to administrate and manage this problem.
Thank you very much. Professor Ahmed, I want to ask the same question to you. You know, in other countries of Southern Africa, you have Kenya, for example, we have mobile money, which is very advanced, you know, to help for financial inclusion, everyone in the society should have access to the system, financial system. In Egypt, what, in your own opinion, can be done to improve financial inclusion, especially for the middle to lower income household? Professor Ahmed.
Well, actually, we need to differentiate when we're talking about financial inclusion in regards to several issues. Whether we're talking about the banking system is the financial inclusion is very well advanced when it comes to people, as Professor Saber said, working in the formal sector, and it is now obligatory that each government employee has his own card where he gets his salary, and it's connected to different other agencies and institutions. So the network is complete. And in this regard, we are working with the right pace, yet the challenge is to keep the system up to the expectations. So the government we have an e-government, and a lot of services are provided through the e-system. We have the system of salaries. We have a number of multitude of systems that are already working with financial inclusion. But in many cases, you have a problem that the system is not working, the system is down, and this affects the efficiency of the system. So you have the hardware, but the software needs to be upgraded. In terms of the mobile banking, this is very well advanced in Egypt, and all of the services now can be done with the mobile banking, whether between individuals or between the government. So it's B2B, B2C, and with the government as well. A lot of services now are paid by the mobile, and people can transfer money, and it is relatively very advanced if you compare it to as well Kenya or South Africa or other hubs in the region. So in that regard, it is working. The challenge is the informal sector and how to have the people included. Not all the people work in the formal sector, so there were other means, including the registration of residents, including the need to register your house, and things like that. So this is taking some time, but it's working. And as well, there is the system of subsidies when we're talking as well about the social inclusion, because a great number of people in the poor segment receive subsidies from the government for food subsidies. So they must have their own card, which allows them to get the subsidies, because the subsidies are still given in terms not of monetary subsidy, but in terms of kind subsidy, not cash, but kind. And in this regard, they are obliged to register by all means, so that the government is able to trace most of the people, whether they are poor or not, whether they are informal or not. So this two projects, the social inclusion and the financial inclusion, and using the financial inclusion as a mean to have social inclusion, is happening in Egypt, despite the difficulties and despite the high percentage of people living in the rural areas and people in the informal sector. But it has been working by different means so far.
Thank you, Professor. I like what you said, using the financial inclusion as the mean to achieve the social inclusion. That's nice. I like it. Professor, I'm still with you, Professor Ahmed. I want to ask you a question about the area that is keen, I'm sure, to both of you, is research. I was shocked, not shocked actually, but I was kind of surprised that in Egypt, the government don't invest more than 1% of GDP on research. I was a little bit surprised, because I know that the value Egypt put on research. And when you speak about research, it's about innovation. And it's the only way I think Egypt can really increase productivity, the kind of productivity Egypt wants to bring unemployment to 1 or less than 1 digit. My question to you is, why? Why Egypt is not putting 1% of GDP? Because you see country like South Korea is 4%, Israel is 4%, China is 2%. China crossed the bar of 1% 20 years ago. If research and innovation is important for productivity, why is it that a country neglecting such an important area of development or that can help increase productivity?
Okay, there are two reasons. A major reason is that you need to know that the budget of Egypt in many cases is too tight. So almost more than 30% goes to debt interest payment, and 25% goes for paying the government employees, and around 20% goes for subsidies. So you have the government is able to play in less than 20% for everything it needs, whether investment, whether new projects, and so on and so forth. So in this regard, there is a squeeze of the money and the percentage that can be given to R&D in the government budget. That's number one. The other issue is that we still have lack of connection between the industrial sector and the manufacturing sector and the agriculture sector on one side, and the people who produce R&D. I'm talking here about the universities and research institutes. There is lack of connectivity, and they don't use each other in the right way. Each of them is living in his own world, with the exception maybe of the agriculture. There is a huge agriculture center in Egypt which is doing very well. It is governmental and related to the University of Cairo. That's the only one that I can say that the research is used in a very efficient way in terms of enhancing productivity in the agriculture sector. But when it comes to manufacturing, there is lack of connectivity. The private sector as well is not putting a lot of money in the R&D sections in it. So it's what I would say here, that there is a need of changing of culture of the importance of R&D, and this change of culture has to be on the government and the private sector level. And the people who produce it need to be recognized in this regard, which is not taking place. There are some pilot projects happening with startups and somebody taking care of them, and the incubators and things like that. But again, not up to a country, to the expectations of a country with the size of Egypt.
Thank you very much, Professor. Professor Saber, Professor Ahmed says it all, but I want to ask you the question: how to bridge the gap between academics and the private sector? How, in your own opinion, can we bridge the gap between you guys at the university doing those research and the industry?
Yes, this is very critical and critical success factor for any economy, to link or bridge the gap between the manufacturing and academic. To solve this problem, and Professor Dr. Ahmed, this issue is very well for this issue, that when the researcher try to select research to prepare PhD or master, focus only on academic, and this is the main mistake. You will need to go to the factory first and they get the problem, and then make your thesis, your master, your PhD. So this is the first. If you want to link or fill the gap between two sectors, the university and the factory, first go to factory and they try to get the research problem to solve it. So this is first, number one. This is required that the president for any university to make a partnership with the factories, direct partnership. No thesis, no master, no PhD without real problem. Number two, the main innovations in Egypt depends on individuals. So we can describe as individually efforts. But the main problem, how we can transfer the patent to commercialization, how we can commercialize the patent. Yes, this is patent and good for the science, but I want to make this patent commercialize. I want to go to the market. This is the innovation. So we need to learn or develop our curriculums and courses with the innovation? What about the tools for innovation? What about the creative thinking to transfer any patent to the market? Number three, what about the funding? The funding issue, it is very problem, yes, but there is more than one source in the world can finance your ideas, and this is appeared in the startup. So innovations appears directly in the startup projects, but when we compare the startup scale and the economy scale, there is no comparison between the size. Talk about small size for startup and large size for the Egyptian economy requirements. Another point, when we talk about the direct support and encourage from the government, we need a package of incentives, not only one action. We need a package. So if you make innovation, what about the business model for this innovation? Yes, it's good. Okay, we can make or provide the incubator or provide another steps. This is the rule for the university. So on brief, we can talk about that. If you want to develop or link or fill the gap between university and the manufacturing sector, first go to the factory and give me the research problem. In summary.
Thank you so much, Professor Ahmed. Thank you so much, Professor Saber. We came to the end of our webinar. I just want to ask you if there's anything you want to add, give insight on concerning, the economy of Egypt that, can provide us with some more insight that we haven't covered.
I would just thank you all, and thanks Professor Saber, and thank you, and just to tell you that the Egyptian economy has passed by a number of economic and political shocks over the last 15 years. So far, it has been resilient and able to manage all the shocks, but definitely there is a status of fatigue happening, and there is a change of strategies that are taking place to accommodate for such shocks. And I believe that the future will be enhancing cooperation, not with the West, but rather with the East, including, when I say the East, it's a general issue, including geographically, as well as going more towards Africa and towards Arab countries in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ahmed. Professor Saber, one last word?
First, I'm so proud to join this webinar with my professor, Professor Dr. Ahmed Ghoneim, and for you and the team. And finally, yes, we're suffering from many challenges and many negative effects, but the confidence in the Egyptian economy is very high because we have the experts, we have the capabilities, but we need to use the professionals to manage our micro institutions. This is the main challenge. And the Egyptian economy in the next years focus on sustainability. This is the main issue for Egyptian economy. Sustainability, when we talk about triangle of economic issue and social issue and environmental issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, all of you who have joined us today to this webinar. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.